It's Thursday night, and it has been a really bizarre day, honestly. Just trying to do things, none of which really go together very well, but here I am. Here we are. So, my thoughts for tonight are mostly about the idea of letting go, that concept that we can control things. Such a basic statement. But for those of us who have anxiety, it's not so basic. One thing people learn when they work with clients with anxiety is that control is threaded through everything, one way or the other. The idea that we need to control our surroundings in order for things to be okay. Fear of losing control. People who have panic disorder, that is ultimately the foundation of that disorder, is the fear of losing control. And it's really complex, but that's one real basic part of it. And as someone who has experienced anxiety off and on throughout my life, that's a big issue for me as well. And I was raised in a household where there was some chaos, some, abuse, a lot of anger, some violence, and I was raised by parents who unwittingly and, ultimately were not always defined by our worst parts, but, who really encouraged me to take care of their emotional needs at the expense of my own. And so I grew up that way. And so, a part of growing up in a household where there's a lot of unpredictable stuff happening in terms of emotion and expression of that emotion, kids who grow up in that environment often grow up kind of codependent. Like they want to control and make sure they are always involved in their partner's well-being, making sure they're okay, anxious about their emotional state, always needing to take care of them, and always at the detriment of the person who is exhibiting codependent traits. I can relate to that a whole lot. And that's something I work with my clients on regularly. And so the issue of control is a big one. And how does this relate to right now? Well, I had a conversation with one of my dearest friends, and she and I have been our constant companions on the phone and in walks, and all throughout this COVID crisis, she and I have been our kind of go-to people. And she was observing in me that over the last couple of weeks, my anxiety expression that she could pick up on was going up slowly. And we were trying to kind of figure out, like, what was the spurring factor? What was the triggering factor? Because for a while I was doing pretty well, and, I wasn't all that worried. And I finally realized what it was. And it was reading the story of someone not too much, somebody younger than me, who was a single woman who died on the floor of her kitchen alone, and reading increasingly about how this illness and all the precautions that everyone has to take means that people often die alone. And somehow that just kind of, my girlfriend and I figured this all out, that, that was a fear of mine that I hadn't really identified. And so I started feeling like I need to not get this virus. And slowly things that I started just kind of circling my wagons. And one of the things I observed was that the walks that I had been taking, that I had so enjoyed at the beginning of this crisis, I was taking long walks, became for me in the last week, 10 days, much less enjoyable, to where I was like, hyper vigilant, like so many of my trauma survivors. I was worried about crossing paths with someone too closely. I was having thoughts about what if I walk through, a place where somebody just coughed, but they're not there, so how would I know? How to keep distance from people, and feeling kind of annoyed with people that were coming down the sidewalk my way. And just, my walks became much less enjoyable. And I don't know that I would have identified all those things I just said had I not had some really deep conversations about fears and anxiety and triggers with my dear friend. And so today I took 2 walks, one of them a very long walk, one of them a shorter walk, both of them purposeful. I had a place to go and I walked. And the first one, I just focused on being mindful and using self-talk. I had determined that I'm going to reclaim the joy that I feel when I walk. And, having talked about all this with my analytical friends, she, of course, reinforced that the odds of any of these things I was afraid of happening are really slim. And I had to kind of think about the fact that I cannot control. Ultimately, I can't control whether I'm going to get this illness and have all these scary things happen to me, and alone, being that I'm now a single woman, and all the things that come with that, which I generally love. I love my life as a single woman, but this illness has heightened some of those challenges for me emotionally. And so anyway, I really had to confront the idea I cannot control whether I'm going to get COVID. I can do all the things I'm supposed to do. But, there's always going to be some element that we can't control, and that's so basic for everybody. But for someone with anxiety, that is something that has to be reinforced. And again, I see this with so many of my clients I work with who have some of the things that I'm expressing super common. And so, yeah, I really had to self-talk myself into saying, I can't control every variable, and I'm going to choose to do things that give me a slight bit of risk because they bring me joy. And so I took a mindful walk today. For the first half of that walk, I just didn't listen to music. I just walked and was mindful. This is my mind-body practice that I want to talk about. What is a mindful walk? It is using your senses to keep yourself in the moment and to keep focused and not allow anything else to happen. And mindfulness can be done with eating. It can be done just in any given moment, stopping and just saying, what do I hear? What do I smell? Mindfulness can be done at any given time and has myriad benefits. But for my purposes, and this instance, I took a walk and I was mindful of my feelings, and I was reminding myself how much joy I feel in walking, and I was smelling. So being mindful means using all your senses. So what do I smell as I'm walking? What do I feel, like when my feet hit the ground, or if I reach out and touch something? What do I see? And I waved at people on their porches, and sincerely. And, what do I hear? I hear birds. I hear my feet moving. I hear people closing doors. I hear kids talking and laughing. What do I see? Again, the things I see on the porch. What do I taste? Well, I wasn't really tasting much, but say if I had gum. Actually, I started my walk with gum, so I was tasting. So what do I smell? In New Orleans, you smell things all the time when you walk around. Right now I'm smelling gardenias, and on a mindful walk, I will pick a flower and smell it and continue to smell it as I go. And so that was just, and then I really did find myself enjoying it. And, there were a couple times when I would cross somebody's path and I would just say, I can't control this little variable. I can't. And so those are the things that are on my mind. The idea that I have to just accept a certain amount of risk and accept unknowns here and let go the idea that I can control every aspect of this, because I can't. Just as I, couldn't control other aspects of my life. And, we can never control what another person says, does, or feels. And, for anxious folks, that's sometimes a hard hard thing to grasp. Even coming from the best and loving intentions, never a manipulative or malicious intent, but for me, I've always wanted to control, without being conscious of it, that people feel that they like me, that I'm, making people feel good about themselves, that I'm doing something the right way, that the person is not going to get angry. Those kind of things we have to learn we can't control. We can only control ourselves and our thoughts, and to some degree our feelings. So those are my thoughts for the day. I did record an affirmational grounding exercise that I said I was going to record 2 days ago, but there you go, COVID delay. It is on my playlist, on my channel, on my Mind Body Exercises playlist. And the song I'm going to add to my playlist is a song called On Your Porch by a band called The Format. So there's a Spotify playlist. It's one of the longest playlists I've ever seen, and it's because it's a public playlist. It was started by a podcast. I can't remember the name of it, but the name of the playlist is Anthems of Change. And the podcast host wanted people to add songs to this playlist that helped get them through difficult periods of their lives or periods of great change. And it's a beautiful playlist, really diverse, incredibly diverse. And I listened to that when I did start music on my walk. And I wanted to return to that playlist because I think it's important. I love the idea of a community adding music to a playlist that does nothing but help them get through a hard time. So I was loving that playlist, and there was a song that's it's a story in a song, and it's a beautiful story about loving, listening, accepting, and growing insight, and talking about it to someone important in their life. It's beautiful, and it's called On Your Porch by a band called The Format. Band I never heard of before, a song I'd never heard before, but it moved me today, so I'm adding it to my playlist. And then I'm going to do some breathing and get myself ready for bed.